Welcome to Carnegie Mellon Online. For more multimedia from Carnegie Mellon University, visit www.cmu.edu/multimedia.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of the Journeys lectures this semester. We had 4 of them last semester, starting with Randy Pausch's, and this semester we have 4, and this is the first of the 4, and as it happens, the second one is again this week. On Thursday, Dr. Sophie Freud will talk on her journey. The first Journeys lecture from a person outside the campus, although you will find that she's not totally disconnected from our campus. But today it's my honor to welcome for the first Journeys lecture of the spring 2008 semester, President Jared Cohen, whom we all know, have come to know and love these years. I won't give a long lecture about him, because I should let you hear from him about his life, his qualifications, his degrees are, he has an undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania in environmental engineering, a PhD from MIT, and then went on to become faculty at Johns Hopkins, where he was vice president for research when he moved to Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies to be the dean. And from there, we were fortunate enough to attract him here in 1998. And so I give you the 8th president of Carnegie Mellon, President Jared Cohen.
Thank you, Indira. Thank you also for your leadership in creating this series of lectures and for including me in it and giving me the honor of being the first Journeys lecturer of this semester. I've only heard one other Journeys lecture, and that was Randy's that Indira referred to. This ain't going to equal Randy's lecture, I can guarantee you that. That was a remarkable event for everybody who was there, and now millions of people around the world who have seen it since. And I have to tell you, I was just in Europe and India, and in both places, many people commented to me about Randy's lecture, having seen it on the internet. Well, this is quite an opportunity and a task and a challenge for me. Those who know me well, I think, know that I don't particularly like talking about myself. I make it a practice to be out of the country on my birthday, which drives my wife crazy. I just don't go in for that. So this sort of celebration of Jerry is new to me. But I admire what the Journeys lectures are all about, and I'm happy to sort of play along here. And if you read my little abstract for the lecture, first of all, the title is The Accidental President, and that is my theme. Basically, the incredible events that have occurred to me, incredible in the sense of I never expected them, and I probably didn't deserve them, and the special people who have meant so much to me that have gotten me here. And it certainly was not the result, that is, that I'm standing before you as President Carnegie Mellon. It certainly was not a result of any life plan that I had. And in my abstract, I talk about my skepticism about life plans. Great if you have one, but I just don't think they amount to much because you can't really plot out what your life is going to be like. As I say also in that, I'm not a fatalist, though I do believe that choosing goals and being ambitious are important things to do, and I recommend that for everybody. But the key thing, and I guess my major philosophical statement here, is enjoy the journey and don't worry too much about where it's going to take you. This is a very personal lecture you're about to hear, or personal talk. I won't call it a lecture. And I'm going to focus particularly on the people who have influenced me. So I'll fill in the details that Indira missed. I was born in 1947 in Cleveland, Ohio. So you can do the math. I'm 60. It's true, I'm 60. And it meant that I grew up in the 50s, and I'm a kid of the 60s in the sense of being in college in the 60s. I won't try to describe to you what it was like growing up in the 50s. I'll recommend to you instead a wonderful book I've almost finished. Michael Murphy and his wife Nancy gave it to me as a Christmas present. It's Bill Bryson's latest book called The Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid. Anybody else read this? Yeah. You like it? It's phenomenal. So one of our favorite things to do, Maureen and I, is to go to our country retreat on the weekend and sit quietly in the living room and read. The problem is, every 5 minutes I'm bursting out loud with laughter reading Bryson's book. It's a wonderful, well, he writes wonderfully anyhow. It's a wonderful capturing of what it was like to grow up in the 50s. I grew up starting on the east side of Cleveland. And the first very important event in my life occurred in second grade when I met my future wife. That's your moment to go, ah. Second grade. He met his wife in second grade. It's true. She remembers that I was an exceedingly polite second grader, or at least for a boy in second grade, when our class was going on a field trip to hear the Cleveland Orchestra. And she was struggling to get her coat on. It was February. And I showed her the trick of she was wearing a suit, holding your suit jacket sleeve when you stick it in your coat. To this day, she remembers that. I moved away in fourth grade, leaving her behind, abandoning her for the first time, to a suburb of Cleveland called Beechwood, in middle to upper middle class, incredibly undiverse suburb. The school was, I'd say, about 90% Jewish, which I am. Bunny joined me in junior year. I say that she found me. It took her from fourth grade to 11th grade to figure out where I had gone. She tracked me down and moved to Beechwood, and we renewed our acquaintance and started dating in senior year, but I'll come back to that. Almost everybody in our class went to college, and about half of those went to Ohio State. One didn't have, it was a different time, different place. The kind of pressure and stress that goes along with college applications these days and how your life is ruined if you don't go to an Ivy or a new Ivy like Carnegie Mellon just didn't exist at that time. College, oh yeah, okay, where should I go? Well, why don't you try Ohio State, which I did. I was interested in engineering, so I applied to Purdue also. These were the days of what they call rolling admissions, that is, at large state universities. When they got your application, they immediately process it. And if you're above a certain level in grades, I guess SAT scores or ACT scores, you got in. So my grades were high enough, an issue I'll come back to also, and my SAT scores were high enough that I got admitted right away to Ohio State and Purdue. Early enough that I could still apply elsewhere. Now, the one thing I can't remember and I can't figure out is how the heck my parents got me to fill out those applications early enough to have been accepted before the deadlines. It's so unlike me. I must have been having a bad day or something. So there it was, and so my parents said, why don't you apply somewhere else? I said, where? And they said, how about a school in the East, meaning prestigious? I said, all right, where? And they said, how about the Ivy League? Okay, I said, I know there are 8 of them, which one? And they said, go find out which is the easiest one to get into. So I asked around. We had great college counseling in those days. You asked your friends. So where do you think? We all agreed it was probably Penn. So I applied to Penn, knowing nothing about Penn, and even less about whether they even had civil engineering, which was my interest. and how good it was. Clearly, it was far inferior to Purdue for sure, and probably Ohio State also. And the first time I ever saw Penn was when my parents slowed down long enough for me to jump out of the car to move in for freshman year. So I chose civil engineering because at one time in my father's somewhat checkered career, he was into real estate and actually built some apartment buildings. And I watched the construction process and got kind of interested in that. I thought it'd be cool to build things, to learn how to build things. And civil engineers build things, so that was the depth and extent of my career exploration and how I chose to be a civil engineer. So I found myself in Philadelphia in 1965, leaving Maureen at home in Cleveland. By the way, her whole life, she's been known to me and everybody else that's close to her as Bunny. So if you don't mind, dear, you're going to be Bunny for the rest of today. Leaving Bunny behind in Cleveland. And there I was on the Penn campus in 1965. Now, for those who are not of a certain age and from America, like me, you can't imagine or know what going to college was like in the mid to late 60s. In some respects, it was phenomenal in that this was a very exciting time. It was the 60s. And Penn, though not sort of the heart of the student protest movement the way, say, Columbia or Berkeley were, nevertheless had its share of unrest. We were particularly well set up for this. Our president was like from central casting. He was chosen. He should have worn a T-shirt that said Generation Gap. His name was Gaylord Harnwell III, which, I mean, I could stop right there. But he was the image of the patrician academic who had no idea what the kids of the 60s were like, and indeed he didn't. Our orientation consisted of a 1-hour session in the biggest auditorium on campus with him and the student body president, during which our class on instruction chanted an obscene cheer in front of this poor president. And I have to tell you, more than once in my presidency, I've thought about him. And I've thought about, especially when students have come to see me, say, like to protest something, I'm thinking, my God, I'm Gaylord Harnwell III. And there's part of me that wants to say, I'm a kid of the 60s, go, that's great. But I don't do that, I gotta play the part. So I sit back and look mildly disinterested and offended that I'd be. It's wonderful. So to add to this, though, I was an incredibly immature 17-year-old. Frankly, I had no business in college at that moment in time, and certainly not far away from home for the first time. So the combination of a kid who really didn't know what college was about and didn't know how to be a good student. Indeed, I got through high school and by virtue of smarts and not much work, added to the 60s, which was sort of licensed to do anything, try anything, experiment with anything, just don't respect authority. You can do anything. That was a pretty potent combination. To say that I was a crummy student is putting it mildly. Then I got married. So Bunny and I got married after my sophomore year when we were 19. It was the smartest move of my life. And to show you how smart it was, this being Carnegie Mellon, you can do the math, I graduated with a 3.0. My last 2 years after I got married, I had a 4.0. Barely. It might have been a 2.99. I actually didn't quite make it to 2.0 in one of my first 4 semesters. So at least Bunny saved my academic life, if nothing else. The civil engineering curriculum at Penn, and everywhere at that time, was extremely structured. Students, I want you to listen up here. In 8 semesters, I had exactly 8 electives, so 1 a semester on average, and 2 of those were specified. You can elect to take that English course, and you better. And you can elect to take that microeconomics course, and you better. So I had 6 electives in 4 years. And I did okay. But as I said, the latter half, much better than the former half. I can't say that anything really got me excited until I took a special course taught by a really special guy. His name is Iraj Zandi. He was the professor of environmental engineering and management, the only one. This was the late 60s, mid to late 60s. And I took the required course in environment. And he was terrific. And I got turned on to something that I really found interesting. And to boot, I got to do research with him. I have no idea how that came about. I think I needed the money, probably. But doing research with Dr. Zandi meant taking this mountain of papers he had assembled on the transport of solid waste. That's what environmental engineers call garbage. Solid waste through pipelines. That was the thing he was working on. And categorizing all these papers, which sounds like drudgery, but I actually really enjoyed it. It gave me a chance to read the literature, as it were. And I really appreciated that. And it was Zandi and his exposing me to this area that got me interested in going on to graduate work. And having an extremely supportive wife who got me through undergraduate school so that I could go to graduate work. I went to MIT. But let me tell you a little bit about how I got to MIT, because this is very much now getting into my characterizing myself as the Forrest Gump of university presidents. So I applied to Purdue again, MIT, and Berkeley, and I was accepted at all 3. I don't know, the admissions departments in those days weren't as sharp as they are now. But this was 1969. It was the first year of the draft lottery. Now, some of you are too young to know about this. The Vietnam War was still going on. And in a remarkable moment of social fairness by the U.S. government, there was a decision to have a lottery based on your birthday instead of what was happening, which was a bunch of poor kids going to fight our wars and college kids getting deferments, which I was not begrudging, don't get me wrong. So the deal with the lottery was they would, based on your birthday, you got a lottery number, 1 to 365. And they predicted they would get up to 250 to fill the allotment that year or in the next year. And the deal with the lottery was when your number got called, you went, unless you had some, like you were physically not able to go to the Army. But college deferment, no kind of professional deferment, you went. My number was 234. So I figured, I'm going to get drafted. And the one thing Buddy and I didn't want is to be in Boston or Berkeley, California, or God forbid, West Lafayette, Indiana. Sorry for any Indianians I just offended here. And for me to go off to war and her left alone. So I remember the weekend in April, we went home to Cleveland, and I interviewed with some engineering firms in Cleveland. I got offered a job on the spot, and I accepted it, more or less on the spot. We returned home to Philadelphia on a Sunday, and there's this big package in our mailbox from MIT. And in classic MIT fashion, they didn't say, because they couldn't come out and say, if you come to MIT, you will not get drafted. Instead, they said, here's a list of every person ever called by the Cambridge Draft Board who was a student at MIT. And if you look at it, not a single one was ever drafted. The Cambridge, Massachusetts, being Cambridge, Massachusetts Draft Board was not like any other draft board. They were basically saying, you won't get drafted out of MIT. Called the consulting company on Monday, said, gee, I got this opportunity to go to MIT. I hope you understand. They said, sure, absolutely. That was that. I went to MIT. It was an extraordinary 4 years, from 1969 to 1973. I was so fortunate in terms of timing. I happened to arrive the same day my advisor arrived. I didn't know he was going to be my advisor, but he turned out to be. His name is David Marks. He's still a professor at MIT. MIT had decided the year before that they were going to create a new group within the civil engineering department in water and environmental systems analysis. This was a new thing. Harvard had done something a few years before in something called the Harvard Water Program, which was quite extraordinary. They had gotten together engineers, mathematicians, economists, and political scientists with the idea of analyzing and looking at water issues from this new multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach, which may sound not so exciting. I mean, to me it's exciting no matter when you would look at it, but it may not sound so novel today. Then it was completely new. MIT's idea was, we're actually going to implement this. Harvard can dream about it, MIT is going to do it, and they did. Well, at least they put together the faculty group of engineers, operations researchers, and economists within the civil engineering department. So I found myself part of this brand new group with these brand new faculty. And being part of a department or a program within a department, which is just figuring out what it is the most exciting time to be affiliated with any program. You talk to our former PhD or even MBA students who were GSIA during its first few years or first couple of decades, and they'll tell you about the intellectual excitement of just being there. Just the interplay among faculty, because they didn't know what they were doing. They saw, Herb Simon and Jim March and Dick Sard and Bill Cooper having these big battles and fights about what management science should be, what business education should be. For a student, it is electrifying. That's what I found myself moving into. However, it has to be said that the MIT Civil Engineering Department was stodgy, to say the least. They had these new young Turks, but they had a bunch of older faculty whose basic attitude was indifference. And their attitude towards the few graduate students who opted to be in this was, sure, you want to do that? That's fine. But that doesn't mean you're going to get out of 4 semesters of hydraulics and 3 semesters of hydrology and 8 semesters of water quality engineering. So I had to take all of that, and I'm glad I did. And there was superb stuff and everything else on top of it. But I'll tell you, it was phenomenal, and MIT was absolutely the place to do it. I took all the operations research courses I could fit in. Now, operations research was still relatively new then, but there was a group of people at MIT who were really pushing the boundaries of it. And there were 2 faculty members in particular, kind of wild guys, who had the bright idea that they were going to try to unify the theory of optimal control and mathematical programming. Now, that's meaningless to most of the people in this audience, but I don't know, I can't think of the parallel in any other field. The two have clear similarities. They seek optimal solutions to certain systems, but the systems are so different that the mathematics are are almost completely separate. I conned 2 other civil engineering graduate students to take this course with me, which was populated completely by double E's and OR majors, so it was way over our heads. There was one textbook, a wonderful, beautiful book by a guy named Leuenberger, that was only 100 pages long, which also attempted to unify these 2 theories. And every page was so dense, it took the 3 of us 3 hours to figure out every page. It was an incredible experience. I don't know how much I learned or retained, but I sure learned a lot of language and nomenclature and the confidence to learn about OR. The economic side of me was equally exciting. The MIT economics department then was considered to be probably the best, along with Harvard and probably Berkeley, and still is one of the very best, if not the best, and especially mathematical. I put myself through the 2-semester graduate microeconomics curriculum. Now, economists in the audience should go, ooh, that's their weeding out thing. And when I went to college in those days, there were stories about large public universities where they'd get up in the required geography course or something with 2,000 kids in it. And it's reputed, or it's probably just legendary mythology, that the professor would say, look to your left, look to your right. One of you will be gone by the end of this semester. Well, that's what the graduate microsequence was like at MIT. It was a bear. But it allowed me, I got through it, because it didn't matter. I was the only non-economics major, which was kind of cool. I was an engineer, too. They didn't know what to make of me. But it didn't matter, because, I didn't, who cares if I got a C or a B? C is like failing. It didn't matter, just so I got through it. But it allowed me to take graduate welfare economics from Paul Samuelson. Now, that's a name you should know. Samuelson at that time, even then, was old. Now he's still alive, I think. He's got to be like 100. And for my thesis, which I'll come back to, I was actually really getting deeply into welfare economics. And I'd read everything he had written. And the way he taught the course was perfect for me. He at this point in his career, he'd become a lousy teacher. In fact, he might have always been a lousy teacher, I wouldn't know. But at this point in his career, he would come in and there would be a particular topic for the day. And he would just sort of go on about the people he knew and little anecdotes from the time he worked on that topic, which for someone who'd read everything he'd ever written, it was phenomenal. And in the last 10 minutes, he'd hand out handwritten notes and quickly go over it, and that was it. This was an amazing experience for me. I realized, and really pretty much after the fact, that this civil engineer, quote unquote, who went to Penn to learn how to build bridges, got interested in environment, and now was doing more operations research and economics, really didn't like engineering and science that much after all. What I really liked was mathematics, still do, and the ability to use mathematics to get insight into phenomena, but especially into social issues. And you can think about water and environmental issues as big social issues. I'd found my calling is too strong. I wound up in the right place, let's put it that way. MIT, or this group at MIT, wanting to put into practice what Harvard had conceived of, also had taken on a huge, complicated project in Argentina, funded by the United Nations, where they were going to design, this is actually really arrogant, but they were going to use these newfangled water resource systems techniques to design a whole river basin development, a big river that went all the way from the Andes in the west to the Atlantic Ocean in the east, totally undeveloped in Argentina, and we were going to find the solutions. We never did. Predictably, they failed politically, which was a great learning experience. But other great experiences that I learned from was working with my Argentine classmates, which was great fun in every way. And also extending this point about failing to get solutions, sort of the hubris of modelers. Now, this was a time when there really was a feeling, thanks to the U.S. Defense Department, that we could use models to solve everything. Business problems, government problems, certainly military problems, which were where OR was especially successful and where it was born, and even natural resource problems like water resources management and social problems would come next. I learned some great lessons there about how that just doesn't work. My faculty, and David Marks in particular, gave me the extraordinary freedom to do a thesis like one they had never approved before in the history of their department. I basically did an extended literature review of everything written about a sub maybe subfield in mathematical programming called multi-objective programming, which became the centerpiece of all of my work from that point on, and eventually a book based on my thesis. It was a great experience. Along the way, another important person in our lives, and that was our daughter, Halle. Now, I mention this not only because my daughter has been a source of incredible personal satisfaction and joy, but because she, without knowing it, contributed greatly to my success. You know what newborn babies are like. Our daughter was born in my second year of graduate school. And at MIT, the requirement was that you take your qualifiers at the end of your second semester of your fourth semester, second semester of your second year. And the qualifiers then amounted to a 4-day take-home exam, followed by, in 2 or 3 weeks, a 3-hour oral exam. It's a take-home. This take-home exam literally meant you worked on this every waking moment. You didn't take time out to eat. You ate, obviously, but while you were working on the exam, you worked on it every minute you had. I had a newborn baby at home. The first night she ever slept through the night was the first night of that exam. And of course, she slept through the night every other night after that. She still sleeps through the night. David Marks, my advisor, had studied at Johns Hopkins. That's where he got his PhD. So I was in my last year of graduate work, and he said, so Jerry, there's a job open at Johns Hopkins. Why don't you apply for it? Yes, sir. I applied for it, and I interviewed and got the job. And by the way, that's how I've gotten every job since then. I'll tell you about that in a minute. It's extraordinary. I didn't go looking. It just sort of was presented to me. Unbelievably lucky. Just one side note about my negotiating skills. So I went to Baltimore to interview and came home, and 2 days later, the chair of the department called me. And I answered the phone, and this is the side of the conversation Bunny hears, who's a great negotiator. Really? You're offering me a job? That much? I'll take it. She was furious at me. You idiot! You don't accept a job like that. How much did they offer you? $13,000. We felt rich for a month or so, maybe more like an hour. So I was at Johns Hopkins from 1973 to 1992, where I spent most of my academic career. And as lucky as I was to arrive at MIT at that special moment when they created this new program, I was equally lucky to find myself in a unique department at Johns Hopkins called DOGGE, acronymically, if that's a word, standing for Department of Geography and Environmental Engineering. It's unique because who else would put together geography and environmental engineering? But they did. It was a result of the sort of burst of interest on campuses in multidisciplinary environmental coursework and programs. But unlike most of them, this one survived and still is thriving today. It was largely, then actually exclusively a graduate program, now still largely a graduate program. It was a small faculty of about, it varied between 15 and 20, and it ran the gamut from very traditional engineers to a Marxist geographer. David Harvey actually was on campus here last semester, and I missed him, unfortunately. I was out of town when he was here. I would have liked to see him. He's brilliant. He's a wonderful guy. All held together by this remarkable man named M. Gordon Loman, better known as Reds Loman, who was phenomenal. He was a physical geographer, a geomorphologist, and just was curious and interested in everything, and somehow made this thing work. I was also incredibly lucky to join Hopkins in this department 2 years after another guy did, a guy named Charles Revelle. Chuck was just like me in a lot of respects. He was trained as a water resource systems analyst, but he was very different from me, and we were perfect complements in the following sense. We shared the interest in water resources and in operations research. He had an additional interest in location theory. I had this interest in multi-objective programming. We put them together and did some wonderful things with it. Chuck was the image, Chuck, by the way, died 2 years ago. He was the image of the old-time academic that unfortunately research universities like Johns Hopkins and Carnegie Mellon just don't accommodate anymore. By that I mean he was a dreamer. He didn't know from raising money or getting grants. He tried, but he was incredibly terrible at it. He just wasn't good at it. But he was always thinking of problems, always. I mean, full time. I mean, his wife Penny would show me napkins where he was doodling on problems. He was brilliant and wonderful. I was very good at raising money and managing students and managing the money we had. We did everything together. We taught together. We did all of our research together. All of our projects were together. It was called for 10 years the Chuck and Jerry Show, which was terrific. We produced just some wonderful things together. Many, many students. There was a time sort of at our heyday when we had 3 major projects and 17 PhD students all going at once. It was really incredible, and those students have gone on to do great things at great universities in the federal government and elsewhere. So that started in 1973. Doggy was not actually part of an engineering school because there wasn't one. We were part of the School of Arts and Sciences at Johns Hopkins because Hopkins, as did some other elite research universities in the mid-60s, abolished their engineering school. Yale did that. I don't know if Princeton ever had one. But if they did, they would have gotten rid of theirs too. Harvard did. They did this because there was this fashion in the 60s where engineering got more and more engineering science-like and ultimately science. And the feeling was, why should we have an engineering school? It just separates our colleagues from the sciences where they belong. And Hopkins got rid of theirs. They realized their mistake by 1979 when they reestablished the engineering school. It's called the Whiting School. And I got a call from the dean of the new Whiting School who asked me to come and see him. And he said, Jerry, you may be promoted in the next few months. Wink, wink. I didn't actually know. I was up for promotion to full professor, which was fast by Hopkins standards. Hopkins was actually slower than CMU in this regard. And would you consider being my assistant dean on a part-time basis? And only for the first time, and you'll see I've had a career of this, I believe in not saying no to your boss. So I said, sure, Dave. Dave, by the way, was a 3-time Carnegie Mellon degree recipient. Sure, Dave, I'll be assistant dean. So I became assistant dean. And then I became associate dean the next year, and then I became full-time associate dean, and that put me on this administrative track. And that got me through to 1986. And then I got a call, like the call I'd gotten from the dean of engineering from the provost in 1986, saying, we're thinking of creating this new position called vice provost for research. Would you do it? I live by my rule of not saying no to my boss. And I said, sure, Dick. I'll be vice provost for research. The worst job I ever had, by the way. It's a fine job here at Carnegie Mellon. Hopkins is another story. Really. I could go into that, but I don't want to take up the time. I'm going on too long as it is. I learned a lot of lessons from that 6-year stint as vice provost for research. Number one is it's really good not to have a medical school. Number two is the way you do budgeting has an enormous impact on faculty willingness to collaborate and your ability to do that. And the third thing was about managing people, which I managed a lot of PhD students, and that's a whole different thing. PhD students are wonderful. Students are wonderful. People that work for you sometimes ain't. And I actually had to fire a guy. And this was a very senior guy. It was the worst day of my professional career. That's the kind of thing you have to do. I need to digress for a minute to add to my Forrest Gump-like life. So early in my time at Johns Hopkins, so I have to add a little more context. So based on what you heard about what I got interested in MIT, and that's what I continue to work on at Hopkins, my interest was and still is basically in how the public, which is to say governments, make decisions about major public investments like water resources development or environmental protection. How does that happen? What are the methods to support that kind of decision making? The fact is, I didn't know a thing about how the government our government really made such decisions. I'd read books about it in papers and realized that political scientists didn't have much to say about that either. Sorry if I offended anybody. I should say, they had a lot to say about it. I don't know how much they really knew about what went on. And I mentioned, boy, it'd be interesting to be part of that, to learn. And that was that. So, out of the blue, a few months later, I get a call from Senator Moynihan. So after a few hours or an hour of trying to figure out whether there was a Maryland State Senator Moynihan, and realizing there wasn't, and based on the telephone number, this had to be Senator Pat Moynihan, I called back, and I was offered a job. How did this happen? Well, one of my graduate students finished up and went to work at the Brookings Institute. Keep that in mind. Now, move over downtown to the Capitol. Moynihan is in markup on the Clean Air Act in a meeting of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, of which he was a member. And he turns to his legislative assistant, Elliot Abrams, by the way, you might know of. He went to jail during the Iran-Contra affair. That's another issue. And he said, "What the hell is CO2?" And Elliot said, "I don't know." And you'll pardon me for saying this, but this is the way Moynihan talked. "God damn it, find me for someone who does." So the word went out from the staff. And one of the staff members, Checker Finn, who hadn't quite yet joined Moynihan, this is very early in Moynihan's tenure as Senate, he's only like 2 months into his term, was at Brookings, my former student was at Resources for the Future, which is next door to Brookings. So this Checker Finn from Moynihan's office said, "I'll go next door to Resources for the Future to try to find an environmental expert." Comes across my former student and says, "I know someone who would like to work in Washington for a year." That's where the call came from. That was an amazing experience. So I worked for Moynihan in 1977-78 for about 12 months as his legislative assistant for energy and environment. It was a phenomenal year for all sorts of reasons, one of which was Moynihan himself, who was quite a character and a brilliant guy. But just seeing the process and being part of the Senate process was terribly exciting. And there were some lessons, some important ones I learned there. And this is something that applies everywhere. So as you might imagine, I spent probably the first 2 weeks saying to myself, "What are you doing here, Jerry? I mean, you're just a middle-class kid from Cleveland, Ohio, and here you are talking to Pat Moynihan and Gary Hart. Oh, and Ed Muskie. Those of you who are environmentalists know how powerful that name is. And you're talking to them like you know what you're talking about. What are you, Jerry Cohen, of all the, I'm starting to sound like Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, of all the millions of middle-class kids in America, what are you doing in my bar, in my U.S. Senate?" And then I realized, well, someone's got to do it. And, the wheel stopped on my name. So let's do it. And I did. And it was actually learning how to talk to important people is kind of an acquired art. They're kind of like dogs in the sense that oh boy, that sounds bad. They sense fear in people, like you can be intimidated, and they'll intimidate you, especially senators. So you've got to you be relaxed, calm, the way I am in front of you right now. I didn't spill my water. It takes some getting used to. And then talking to senators is its own skill, because you got to talk in short sentences and not complicate things too much. Moynihan's favorite, I was kind of like his house scientist, like his pet monkey in a way. And I would do tricks. So he would, if I was on the floor when he was, and it was a lot because this was the year of the Carter National Energy Act. One time he motioned me over. He was sitting with Senator Metzenbaum, who, by the way, he hated. And he motioned me over. He said, "Dr. Cohen," you have to visualize how Moynihan talked. "What is a BTU?" Like I was getting an exam. It's a British thermal unit equal to... "Thank you, Dr. Cohen." And I walk away, and he was very proud that he showed off. Yeah. He had introduced me as having just been plucked from my physics laboratory at Johns Hopkins University. To Moynihan, there was no difference between physics and engineering or biology. If it wasn't the social sciences, he didn't know. So in 1992, I got a call out of the blue. This time it was from Yale. You've been recommended for the deanship of the School of Forest and Environmental Studies. Would you like to apply? I said, why not? I had done 6 years of vice president of research. It really wasn't an issue of what I would do next. Did I really want to go back to doggy, which I love to do? It was worth looking at. So I went, one thing leads to another. They offered me the job, and I went there. And that was a great experience. Yale is a phenomenal university. One thing I learned is how different Yale is from Johns Hopkins, how different, now I know, Carnegie Mellon is from both of those. That was really a valuable thing. One, just a little factoid, and I'll move from Yale. So about a week into my job as Dean of Forestry and Environmental Studies, I'm going back over our finances for the, 8th time, and I realize the endowment of the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies then was big enough that I could close the doors that day, never accept another student or a single research grant, and be able to pay everybody's salary in perpetuity. It's quite a position to be in. But we felt poor as church mice. It was very strange psychology. Anyhow, that's not Carnegie Mellon. We're not about to close the doors. All right, so finally, in the ultimate Forrest Gump event. So I'm sitting in my office, minding my own business, being Dean of Forestry and Environmental Studies, and I get a call. I get a call from Gary. Gary, I know because he is in natural resources at Michigan, sort of a sister school to Yale's forestry school, and good friends with a Heinz School professor here who was like co-chairing the search for the presidency. This is 1996. Gary said, "Jerry, you want to be president of Carnegie Mellon?" I said, "Oh, well, they didn't put it quite. You want to be a candidate for president of Carnegie Mellon?" I said, "No, I'm in my 5th year at Yale. I just got reappointed to a second 5-year term, and things are going great. I don't want to leave." He said, "Don't say no. Go home and talk to Bunny." It was swell enough to say that. "And I'll call you back tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So I went home, and we're having a typical dinner time conversation. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Anything new?" "No." Oh yeah, Gary called. And he wanted to know whether I wanted to apply to be president of Carnegie Mellon. Bunny asked, "So what you say?" I said, "No." She said, "Dummy, do you want to be a college president?" I said, "I guess so." "There's something wrong with Carnegie Mellon?" "No." "Call him back and tell him he'll be a candidate." Gary called the next day and I said, "Well, I guess I'll be a candidate." And amazing, I mean, this really is the way it happened. And so there was a dinner meeting with a trustee and a faculty member in Greenwich, Connecticut, convenient to me. And then a meeting off campus at the Bayer Guest House, because they wanted to try to keep the candidate secret. And then Bunny and I were invited to campus for a couple of days, and then the chairman of the board, shows you how naive I am, called me up at Yale and said, "Can I fly up to talk to you about the presidency?" So we tried to figure out whether that meant he was going to offer me the job or not. It's so stupid. Why else would he fly to me? I mean, he's so polite, he's coming to tell me, "Well, we've decided on someone else." But showing I was no better, I had not acquired any better negotiating skills. When he offered me the job and the money, I said, "That much?" Yeah, well, I got to think about it. Incredible things have happened to me in my career and life. One of the most incredible is that I am the president of Carnegie Mellon. So, you ask the question, why am I here, like in the Senate case? And I still ask myself that question 10 years later. I mean, why do I deserve, of all people, to be president of this incredible institution? And I come up with the same answer. Well, you got lucky, so stop asking, just do it. But there's another question in this case, which is, why am I still here? Not in the sense of why wouldn't I go elsewhere? I mean, why would you want me still to be here? That doesn't quite sound right either. I figured that I would last 10 years if I could. And then I got offered a third 5-year term, which, as you know, I accepted. So the question really is, why do I seem to fit into the presidency of Carnegie Mellon? That's the question I'm asking myself. And the best I've been able to come up with as an answer is that the interdisciplinary thing, I mean, that's my whole career has been about that. That's in my blood, in the same way it's in Carnegie Mellon's DNA. The Carnegie Mellon interest in practical solutions. I can be theoretical, but everything I've done has been started with engineering a problem. This is going a bit too far, but I would venture to say the way Carnegie Mellon is developed sort of organically, one way to put this is Carnegie Mellon's life plan is not so different from mine, which is to say there isn't a plan. That didn't sound quite right either. We have a plan. We have a strategic plan. But what our plan really is to identify areas we're interested in, priorities that we want to pursue. And when opportunities arise, we jump at them. When the phone rings, we're ready to say yes. And finally, I guess one part of this is, why did I stay here if there were opportunities to go elsewhere? And it's easy. Carnegie Mellon is a university incredibly easy to admire, and it's a privilege to be part of. People have had everything to do with my success. Bunny, who saved my academic career, if not my life. Had we not gotten married, who knows? I'd probably be in jail still. Uri Zandi for introducing me to environmental engineering and giving me the opportunity to work in it as his research assistant. David Marks for letting me be part of a great adventure in terms of shaping a new field. And Chuck Ravel, who was just the best colleague anybody could have. So with that, I don't mean to embarrass you, but Bunny, would you come up here? Please, please.
I would have known you were going to ask me to come up here, I would have dressed nicer.
That's another thing. She did not teach me how to dress. To say otherwise would be too embarrassing. So this whole lecture series is about journeys, and Buddy not only kept me on some kind of path, but it absolutely has been my partner throughout this journey. And I want to thank her for it. Thank you. And thank you. So Kathy and Dara told me I could invite questions. I went longer than they wanted me to, but I'm the president, so I get to stay up there as long as I want. Or you can leave.
I was just wondering if you think maybe the reason that you fit so well with Carnegie Mellon is because you're such a nerd.
Such a nerd? You know, I sign everybody's check in this room.
I say that in a nice way.
In an affectionate way.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love Carnegie Mellon and I love nerds that are here.
Well, how does one answer that question? Gee, I've never thought of myself as a nerd. I've never been called a nerd. But if that's what it takes, I can be a nerd. No, I think, just to pick up on the theme, we have incredible diversity of people at this university. And by that I mean not only racially, geographically, but also in terms of interests and in personalities. And we got nerds. We got nerds in every field that we do things in. So we got arts nerds as well as engineering nerds. But we got people who aren't nerds either. And I rather like that. We make room for all of them. And I think everybody benefits from it. You gave me something to think about, though. Gee, am I a nerd? Oh, okay. Walter. Oh, wait a minute. We got to get you a mic. Sorry. Oh, I blew my cover by saying I love mathematics.
When driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike recently, I saw a big sign that said, "Our nerds are better than your nerds." Maybe we should adopt that.
I like it. Our nerds are the best. Sorry, Kathy, I got to run all the way back to Fred. Oh, yeah, why don't you do here first and then Fred in the back.
Okay, so I read before I came here on Wikipedia that you were in a band, and I was wondering how your band played into your journey.
Great question. So, you know, I was very tempted. If had I had time, I might have put together like pictures to support all this, but then I realized who would want to just see pictures of me? However, there's one exception to that, and that's our band photo. It's very cool. Just to prove I'm not a nerd, it's true. At Johns Hopkins, I was part of a band called the New Crusty Nostrils. Now, for those, there should be enough people old enough here to remember this and then explain it to other people. There was a group in the 50s and 60s called the New Christy Minstrels. And they were the height of white bread, America, pablum, vanilla, just the kinds of thing the 60s were all against. And so New Crusty Nostrils was an takeoff on New Christy Minstrels. I was the drummer, and all the other players were my graduate students. And then we were fronted by a girls' singing group. They call themselves a girls' singing group, called the Nazels. So the formal name was the New Crusty Nostrils, featuring the fabulous and exotic Nazels. And any particular gig could vary from 3 to 9 Hazels. And they loved dressing up. It was great. We were pretty bad, but we had 2 phenomenal musicians, the lead guitarist and the bassist. The drummer really was bad, but they carried me. And 1 really good singer. And that's all you need. The other secret was, if things aren't going well, turn it up. If they're still not going well, play faster. And the foolproof one was wait till the crowd had more drinks. And then it always worked. Actually, it was great. For about 3 years, something like that, we were the hottest band around. And we even had a gig in downtown Baltimore in the Inner Harbor area. And we all thought we'd died and gone to heaven. We did a Friday, Saturday night thing at the, the band was going to break up after this because the bassist and the lead singer were going to France. They'd finished their PhDs. That was the one flaw in our plan. I let them finish. And so we do Friday, Saturday night. Saturday night's over. The owner comes up to us and says, "We broke records. Will you be my house band?" And we said, "Gee, we can't. We're breaking up." And he said, in all seriousness, "Why is it always the great bands that break up?" And that's how we reacted. We fell down laughing. It was really a phenomenal few years. You didn't ask, you can see you touched this warm spot here. We played everything from Elvis Presley to Elvis Costello and everything in between. A lot of B-52s, a lot of Ramones. We liked the Ramones. A lot of tunes I would never admit that we played. We were great. Thanks for asking. I think, by the way, that's the only thing that Wikipedia says about me, right? Wikipedia is all up to you. Come on, get online. Tell about that nerd president at Carnegie Mellon. Fred.
Good talk, Dr. Cohen. I have a question. I'm always fascinated with actuary scientists and how accurate they are with predicting insurance. For example, insurance drops when you're 25, and I haven't got the speeding ticket since I was 25. Now, you said that I kind of calculated your GPA in those first 2 years you were at Penn. But could you try to quantify a little bit more what changed when you got married so that you soared so much? Can you try to quantify more specifically?
Thank you for asking that, Fred. Now, it has to be pointed out, Fred got married not so long ago, and his wife is sitting next to him. So I'll be very careful about what I say here, Fred. In my case, it had a particularly big impact because I was so immature, and Bunny was mature enough for both of us, basically. Yeah, I was 19 when I got married, and with the mind of a 9-year-old. Well, maybe 12. And so Fred, I think more than anything, it was, so she quit school after her sophomore year to put me through school and then graduate school. And it was only after our daughter was born and was in grade school that she went back to finish her bachelor's degree and then go to law school, which is a remarkable achievement. I could have never done that. So knowing that she had quit school and she was working full time, it was a little hard for me to behave the way I had been behaving before I got married. And I won't elaborate on how I was behaving before we got married. So it was a sense of obligation to her and the sacrifice she was making. And then eventually, about 5 years ago, I finally matured to the point of being more or less self-sufficient. I'm not self-sufficient. Give me 5 more years. That's why I got reappointed. The board wants to see if I can make it to self-sufficiency before I retire.
Do you have any greater ambitions, both for yourself and for the school? Thank you.
Well, yes. For the school, absolutely. You know, that's one cannot be a Carnegie Mellon without embracing the tendency to aspire to be always better and to have bigger impact. That's the way Carnegie Mellon has always been, and that's the way it is now. So I want very much to have more for Carnegie Mellon, more in the sense of better funding, more notoriety for the great things that we do, and even bigger reputation than the one we have, because we deserve all those things. But I'm not out to make it bigger, although I have to amend that, I guess. We have become global, haven't we? And it's a little hard to be intimate with a campus half a world away. And that we surely are pursuing. But we're not, our ambitions are not to get much bigger than we are. One thing I said that when I became president, that you'll be able to say, there's one thing you'll be able to say for sure when I retired, that Cohen did not start a medical school, a law school, or a major sports program. So in that sense, I don't aspire to those things, but absolutely. We always want to get better here, and I want that for Carnegie Mellon too.
You mentioned that Carnegie Mellon has now gone global, but being on campus here and experiencing students and the culture in different colleges on campus, I have realized that there is a core Carnegie Mellon student, which is very common. Is that same theme common even globally? I mean, would a Carnegie Mellon student at Qatar campus be very identical to a student here?
So that is the central question and challenge for us as we become global. Absolutely the central question. There are related questions which flow from that, but that's where it starts. Those who have gone to the Qatar campus recently will come back and say, I knew it was a Carnegie Mellon facility, not just because of the posters that say Carnegie Mellon. That it's different from Cornell's and Texas A&M's and Georgetown's, and it is reflective of the Carnegie Mellon culture. But I'm not kidding myself. It can't be the same as Carnegie Mellon Pittsburgh. Just as Carnegie Mellon Adelaide can't be the same as Carnegie Mellon Pittsburgh. So the issue we have to figure out is, what does Carnegie Mellon X mean, where X equals something other than Pittsburgh? And are we satisfied that we are retaining the essence of what Carnegie Mellon is in these remote campuses? That's the big challenge. I think it's doable. I think it's happening. But I'm not sanguine in any event. It requires constant vigilance. Thank you very, very much for coming to this lecture, which was special to me. Thank you very much.